Okay, so thank you, everyone. First class on our Shakespeare class, we're going to look at a comedy, and it's a comedy, a very interesting comedy, I think. It's not the, I don't know if it's not the funniest of his comedies, but I think it's the most interesting, at least for me. It's written during his lyric period, so 1594 to 95, thereabouts. Those of you who have access to the internet, look up a Midsummer Night, because there is a festival in midsummer and associations with it. And Shakespeare has those in mind. There is no fixed source for this play, unlike most of Shakespeare's plays, which are drawn from classical sources or from English sources like Holinshed's Chronicles when he's dealing with historical matters. There is no fixed source for this particular play. The reason I say that is that Shakespeare in general has the post-romantic reputation of being a genius, an original genius. And some might neglect or ignore the fact that he is borrowing intensely from other sources and is very happy to do so. He doesn't need to be original in the sense of creating his own story. It's helpful for those of us who want to be writers to recognize that we don't actually have to invent a tale that you've never read before. You can actually borrow, steal, and reconfigure things that have been done before, because the best tales have already been told. C.S. Lewis does it, J.R.R. Tolkien does it. Every author of repute tends to borrow from other sources. We even saw that in first year English when we looked at the epic. Homer himself is probably drawing on different sources, of which they're not written down, so we don't know. But he's plainly telling a story about, let's just say, the Iliad, about Achilles, which is already well known to his audience. Achilles dies by having an arrow shot through his heel, as we know, hence the Achilles heel. But that account is not in the Iliad. It's not there. But we know about it from other sources, but he leaves that unmentioned. Good authors are not feeling the need to invent things out of nothing or start afresh, and Shakespeare is no different on that front. When we do literary theory, if you're doing the history of lit theory with me, we'll come to discuss how there's a paradigm shift in our understanding of creativity and artistic excellence that takes place after Shakespeare in the Romantic period. And that largely attributes artistic excellence to novelty, that is, radical newness, originality. So that we speak of original geniuses, and Shakespeare is the example of the genius par excellence when it comes to English writing. And he was actually held up as much in something called the Quarrels of the Ancients and the Moderns in the French Academy, the Académie Française of the late 17th century. Shakespeare was held up as an example of the moderns, because the debate was whether the ancients were in every sense superior, as some classicists contended, or whether the moderns had exceeded them in some ways. And they pointed to Shakespeare as the proof positive that, in fact, the moderns could be superior to the ancients. And they said that Shakespeare did not follow the rules of the neoclassicists, which is true. He didn't follow them. So his originality, it was because, and this is the Romantic take on it, which I'm just saying now because you would have heard a version on it, he was a natural genius. He associated with nature. He was naturally sympathetic. He was close to that. And this play, A Midsummer Night's Dream, takes place in a forest. Did you find something on Midsummer Night?
I couldn't find it.
You couldn't find anything? Okay.
I guess I just wasn't looking at it.
Midsummer Night, at any rate, will be the longest day of the year. Right? So in terms of pagan rituals, the longest day of the year and the shortest day of the year tend to have significance. And Shakespeare is, to some degree, doing what all Christian writers or thinkers have done, which is taking the culture around them and trying to present the Christian message in terms that will be recognizable to them and yet be transformed from what they would expect there. So in pagan festivals, in Midsummer, this is when the sun is at its zenith, the longest days of the year are upon them. You can stay out, if you're in England, till a good 10:30 at night. When I was in Oxford, it was still light at 10:30. We don't have that here, or you do if you're far enough north. But southwestern Ontario, where Toronto is, it's not far enough north to have that length of day. And the downside of it there, of course, is come mid-winter, December 21st, it gets dark at something like 3 p.m. Pitch black. It doesn't get light till 9 in the morning or something like that. So these are short days. With that is associated certain things. Now, Northrop Frye, if you ever read his book, An Anatomy of Criticism, talks about tragedies and comedies and so forth being associated with certain seasons. And the comedy would be associated with the spring or the summer. And this is this, of course, June 21st marks the end of spring, and you're now into summer. And so but note that it's right at the end of the spring. So there's a sense that the new bloom of the spring life is now on the decline, and it's moving in the other direction. So it's going off the boil, and it's heading towards the fall, in the autumn, and then the winter. So the season is changing. And the new bloom of love is about to fade. And so the play opens with that. Note that I said it was in Shakespeare's lyric period, so it is written in rhyming couplets, which is an intensely artistic form of writing, not characteristic of Shakespeare's plays in general. The effect of rhymed couplets, when you hear them, is a sort of an enchanted quality to the verse. And so it's very artificial. It doesn't fit the idea of just speaking. When you and I speak, we don't speak in rhyming couplets. So there's a conspicuous artistry that the audience, even if they don't read the play, they can hear it. So every couplet has a rhyme to it, and that appeals to the audience. But again, it's not normal speech, so we're aware of the fact that we are watching a performance. So that I'm just saying that because it has an effect on the audience and how they listen and watch the play. They're aware that there's a pageantry, a spectacle going on here, and that it's artificial, and that in some ways it's more intellectual because somebody's taken the time to present it in those terms, those forms of artifice. And it is one of Shakespeare's most experimental plays. There's an eclectic variety of sources for it. But it's also a festive comedy. It celebrates life, and it also celebrates love, as is fitting for a comedy. Now, in its historic sense, comedies tend to deal with, according to Aristotle and with Shakespeare to some degree, with the lower classes, the common people. And it makes fun of them. Whereas a tragedy tends to deal with aristocratic figures, people who are above us in station in life. We look up upon them, and then we sense their fall because we see the height from which they've fallen. If a common figure who is born in poverty and has suffered extreme want in life happens to, take their own life, lose their life, there's some sort of tragedy that befalls, it just seems like, well, that was inevitable. Right? Because they had such a terrible beginning, of course it was going to happen that way. That was to be expected. Whereas in a tragedy with a king, you expect a king with that station not to succumb to the normal problems that every one of us who isn't born to that station succumbs to more easily. Right? So we sense the fall in a tragedy. Likewise, in a comedy, we can look down upon the people, and we look down on them not in the contemporary sense of we despise them, but more in the sense that we, like when we look at children, we identify with them and we can enjoy their foibles right? We live in an egalitarian age. We don't like the idea of a hierarchy in any sense. We need to get over that when we read Shakespeare. Otherwise, we don't appreciate the comedy, and we don't appreciate the tragedy. It's just not there. It's just a flat experience in life. It's one of the reasons why people are losing their sense of humor today. They just can't laugh at anything because it's politically incorrect to laugh at something. The only permissible way of laughing now is at yourself. You can laugh at yourself for now. That might go away as well. But for now, you can still laugh at yourself, just you can't laugh at anyone else because it might be you're thinking lowly of them or something. So it is a comedy, but it's not witty like Much Ado About Nothing, which I was tempted to put on because it is a really funny play. Very witty. It's not just funny, it's witty. It's intellectually powerful, but at the same time extraordinarily funny comedy from both the man and the woman. The woman's absolutely hilarious. The protagonist there. But it is also, and this is one of the other reasons I wanted to look at it, it's a comedy about the imagination. There are dream sequences in it. Much of the story takes place in the dark forest where we can't see what's going on around us. If you've ever been in the Canadian wild, in the forest, it's so dark, the thick cover of the trees, that the light doesn't penetrate it. So it's even during the day, it's dark, let alone at night. And so when that happens, your imagination runs wild. You hear noises, and the noises, is that a bear? You know, there's just a little noise, and it sounds louder as well. Your imagination is woken, just like when you're a child and you hear noises in the dark. Or maybe when you still do. You hear a noise in the dark, I want a nightlight on, because the dark's scary. Why is the dark scary? There's nothing there in the dark that's not there in the light. Well, actually, that's not true. Predators come out in the dark. But it's that you can't see it, but you can imagine something terrible. And come the 18th century, Edmund Burke explains why this is. He calls it the sublime. And our imagination is far more powerful and terrifying than something that we could see. So if you watch a horror movie, the worst and most terrifying moment in a horror movie is when you don't see what's happening, but there's something around the corner or in the dark, and you hear the eerie music and you know something's there, but then when he jumps out and he's got a hockey mask on or whatever, it's just like, okay, this is just stupid. It's not nearly so scary. Or in the Lord of the Rings, when the Balrog's coming, you can hear it, and the drums in the deep, and you can see that. But then when he comes out, the Balrog, this terrible creature with a whip, it's scary, but it's not nearly as scary as it was before he came out. Because you're hearing it and you're thinking, oh, what's this? And it sounds like a door, like a stone door being dragged. And oh my, what is this? And then, well, it is pretty scary. But as soon as you see it, you can comprehend it. And your fears are to some degree limited by the appearance. That's the point. There's a limitation. Whereas your imagination is not limited in that way. Yes. There's as soon as you can rationalize it or understand it, there's a limitation to it, and it ceases to be that. So the imagination runs wild in the woods. And what's interesting here is that and at that point, the passions run wild. The reason no longer controls the passions. And so this is a play to some degree about the right relation of reason and passion. And it is mediated by the imagination. The imagination, Shakespeare says, and in saying so, he really represents the Renaissance view. It's not just Shakespeare's view. Sir Philip Sidney would hold to the same thing, as would all of his peers. The imagination, it represents the right balance of reason and passion to us. And to some degree, it's a play about the problems with over-rationalizing. It begins in, where does it begin? In the home of Lysander, but where is that? Athens is the answer. Athens, the place most associated with philosophy and reasoning. Right? Just because, for historical reasons. Shakespeare, the English playwright, sets his play, even though it's a Midsummer Night's Dream and he's drawing on English folklore, he sets it in Athens of all places, which I think he never visited in his life. Plainly he didn't, on the basis of what we're reading here, and that doesn't matter. So he imagines himself in Athens. In other plays, he imagines himself in Bohemia, Czechoslovakia. He wasn't there either. He's read stories about it, and it's a good place to set things. But he sets it in Athens because Athens represents reason, and the reason is disordered here by the father, who is the ruler of Athens. And yet, even though what he does is legal, the audience, and what he does is legal, is he demands that his daughter marry the man he chooses because he is her father, and she ought to obey him. It says so in Scripture. He wants to do it, and if she won't do it, death or exile, both of which are, to Shakespeare's audience, considered to be outrageous, extreme measures. And he only wants to do it because she won't marry the man he wants her to marry. And why doesn't he want her to marry him? There's no reason, just other than arbitrary willfulness on the father's part. So the audience is sympathetic to his daughter instantly. So this represents the rational order following the laws and yet getting it wrong. It's not right reason. And that phrase, that term, right reason, is very important in this period. There's reason, and then there is right reason. And reason, right here, is not a political term. It's not the reason of the right. It's right reasoning, and right reasoning fits with God's character. That's what right reasoning is. It's right. It's not just correct. It's a correct conclusion to a logical problem. That's just logic. But right reasoning is reasoning in accordance with who God is and who we are as image bearers of God. That's what right reasoning is. And the Duke here, Theseus, is not reasoning rightly. And so he and his daughter, who's also, by the way, nobody's right in the play. Everybody's disordered. The play begins in chaos in some ways. And they'll have to go into the deep, dark woods to put things right. And in other words, a place where their imaginations will run wild, chaos will ensue, and somehow everything will turn out well. So it will end with a whole series of marriages. Question? No. Okay. Sorry, I thought I saw a hand. So let me say something about the imagination, because the imagination there are two views of the imagination in Shakespeare's day, and he is utilizing both of them here. The first is a Neoplatonic view. Neoplatonism is most associated with a writer by the name of Plotinus, who tried to Christianize Plato more or less in some ways. But you can trace it back to Plato's dialogue Ion. This is not Plotinus, this is Plato. And in that, the poet is inspired by a kind of madness. This is the traditional view of what poets do. They call upon a power beyond themselves. This is, even if you think about the invocations of the muses in the epics, which are there in 9 different types of the arts, actually. There's an appeal to a power that exceeds theirs in order to tell the story, which will do better than they would be able to do on their own. And it's a kind of madness. It's a prophetic power. It's a power to do things that an ordinary human being could not do. So some kind of divine power is invoked. And that power has the capacity to take, if you're a playwright like Shakespeare, take his audience to a higher view of life and reality than an ordinary human being could do. So it's a positive thing. And if it's ruled by reason, it can become prophetic or poetic even. Let's see if I can find lines here. I don't have the lines, are the wrong ones. I need a different version of this book. But if it's ruled by reason, it can become a prophetic or poetic power. But when it's deprived of reason, reason which one acquires mastery of as one approaches adulthood, by the way. You can say, I have a 4-year-old going on a 5-year-old. He presents the forms of arguments in the sense that he says, well, I want this because, he says because, and then what comes after because doesn't really fit with, I want this because I want this is this. But he uses the word because he's heard us say and give a reason for it, and the reason it's a legitimate reason. In his case, I want this because, and then he will give some reason. That's the form of an argument without any rationality. I'm not saying he has no capacity for reason, but he isn't able to master it in any way. So in terms of teaching, he would be in the grammar phase of life. He's able to speak. He's able to articulate himself. My boy's quite bright. It's not a slur on my son, should he ever watch this on YouTube someday. This is not saying anything about him. It's about 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. They're in the grammar phase, so they can memorize great swathes of material. They can acquire languages terrifically well at this stage, but they're not really able to contend with challenges and causation and false arguments and so forth. They can't really do that other than by looking at people. They look at them. Is that a bad guy? You ask that all the time. Is that a bad guy? Bad guys could wear black, right? And the good guys wear white, but he's sophisticated enough, and all children are actually, to know that actually it's not quite that simple and straightforward. And it usually will be the look in their eyes, or they'll do a sort of a gesture in their face or something. That's a bad guy. Or and he's big on that. Big guy, good guys, bad guy. I'm told that children can do it very early on. And they expect the bad guys to get punished. And if they don't, they get angry. It's really interesting. But that's the grammar phase. He's not yet in the logic phase. The logic phase is grade 4, 5, on to 8. That's when people can start to understand logic, the laws of logic, the rules of logic, without which, says Aristotle, thinking is impossible. So the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, these 3 basic laws of logic that Aristotle outlines, they can understand them at that stage. But they can still get it wrong. And they can be led astray by something that the ancient world might not recognize, but Shakespeare certainly does. It's that thing called sin. That leads people to rationalize their conclusions and baptize them with, well, it must be right because I have authority. I'm in authority, therefore what I decide must be reasonable and must be good because I'm in authority. That's what her father's like. So it's not that he's incapable of logic, it's that his logic has been tinged by his sinful self-interest and his desire to dominate his daughter to the point where she has no identity. And Shakespeare, interestingly, is sympathetic to the daughter. So, whenever people suggest that to playwrights or authors or anyone of this period, this was a misogynistic era, I just say, really, have you actually read the plays? And have you watched a Shakespearean play? Shakespeare seems to be highly critical of abusive patriarchal figures. Highly critical. And he does it by presenting really dislikable patriarchal figures. He also presents some highly likable male figures. So, as I said, there's a broad range. You can't, but it's not a narrow straw man type of thing. But most certainly here, Theseus is a patriarch in the worst sense of the word. Abusive, uses his authority for his own purposes and not for the benefit of his daughter. She, on the other hand, seems moved by her passions and seems to desire to marry her choice simply because she desires it. There's no reasoning behind her wishes either. And it's equally wrong. It's just because it's her choice doesn't make it any more right than the fact that he chose a different man. It's just as irrational. Both of them have made choices for reasons that they could not be justified. You may say, well, that's it's her prerogative to make a mistake there. And of course it is in one sense, but Shakespeare, when he's dealing with a comedy, he's talking about the ideal outcome, not what's possible, but what ought to be. She ought to wish the best husband she could have. And that won't be the one that she is arbitrarily attracted to simply because maybe her father opposes him. That's what seems to be the attraction. Daddy doesn't like him. Oh, then I like him. I really like him. Really? That's not a great reason. So both of them are in the wrong. And Shakespeare is, I think, again, quite gifted in presenting both of them as being, we're sort of sympathetic, and then it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not totally with you here. There's a problem here. How is this going to get fixed? Jaden.
Did the Renaissance and medieval peoples, did they have an understanding of the value of passion? Like, did they see passion as something that was always subordinate to reason?
It's almost only negative.
Okay.
It's almost only negative, unless it's been filtered through the imagination and is working in harmony with right reason, which it can. The passions can.
Is there right passion?
Yes, and it's ruled by reason, and it's often presented in this dichotomy of body and mind as well. So your body is ruled by your mind. They work in sync. There's no contrast there. So what you desire with your body is also you can assent to with your head. There's no contrast there. So there's a sort of dualism there and implicit Gnosticism. It privileges the intellect over the body. And that is problematic. But the reason or the imagination is the thing that reconciles those two errors. And really he's presenting it, if you want to take it as a philosophical text, he's presenting two ways of getting it wrong. You can privilege the reason, and that will kill the body, and the reason represented by the male and by the eye. The eye represents reasoning, the reasoning power, the light of reason that you can see, something you can see clearly and distinctly about. And the passions, which are things that are hard to understand, dark, and yet powerful, extraordinarily powerful, in fact more powerful than reason, which every philosopher has always acknowledged, by the way. The passions rule us. They do. So they need to be tamed. They need to be. And you don't want a public that is ruled by the passions. It's chaotic and it's destructive.
Did writers blame the fall of Rome for that?
Fall of Rome?
Because as we learned with you when we were doing...
Are you blaming me for this? Yes.
When we were doing Aeneas.
Yes, the Aeneid.
Yeah, the Aeneid. Rome was founded by Venus, who was passion, and Mars, who was war.
Yeah.
And the Romans were governed by their passions, and that was...
Well, that's
again and again and again. So did they blame the Romans' fall for their tendency to lean into passion instead of leaning into reason?
Well, this is set in Athens, and this is Shakespeare, and I don't get any hint that he's blaming Venus for that. Oh, he might blame Venus, but he's not blaming the Romans.
Sure. Oh, I wasn't talking about in this context.
Oh, you're not talking about this? Oh, okay.
I should say.
Well, this is a topic, a subject that C.S. Lewis writes about a fair bit. When he writes, say, That Hideous Strength, which you did with me last year, and talks about Eros, unbaptized, and what a terrible thing it is to be ruled by the passions. Because there's a reason that Eros was worshipped as a goddess, but it's a goddess that you don't want, that is a cruel goddess and will destroy you, just like it did Dido. Right? She was not amenable to reason. She gave way to her passions, and it destroyed her. It will destroy all of you. It will destroy everyone. Lewis talks about that. I'll talk about that next semester, because I guess we'll do some Lewis next semester again. It's a topic that playwrights and poets have extensively engaged with, almost more than any other topic.
The Bible does too.
And the Bible does as well.
Hearts are fickle.
Of course, it's a fickle thing. Their heart's a bit bigger than passions. Heart is the driving force, but the passions are, it's not that far off it. Thing that most drives you.
Whereas wisdom is always spoken highly of in the Bible.
And Christ is the wisdom, and Christ is the wisdom of God. So so how does that fit? Proverbs 1-9 is a good meditation on that topic. But I'm getting a little off topic here. That's okay. So I said there were two views. I gave you the positive one, the one ruled by reason. That is a view of the imagination that Shakespeare holds, and he holds it as a Renaissance playwright, and that is what he thinks he is doing. He is doing an intensely moral thing and something that will be for the public good. When he writes a play, he is educating people's imagination so that they think and want the right things. And they need to be led there by example, and hence it's dramatized. Shakespeare believes in mimesis, in representation. People act in accordance with the things that they most admire and what they see. So it's important that they observe things that are true and good and beautiful, and that the good, true, beautiful, good, and just things are praiseworthy and praised on stage, and not that they watch filth and corrosive dramas like Game of Thrones. I just wanted to bash it because I always do that. There's any number of things, which is basically pornography. It's not far off. And violence. It's terrifically violent. It's just one example because it's particularly powerful and much widely praised. I think it's corrosive on its audience, on their moral sensibilities. It promotes incest right from the outset, and rape, and there's no consequences for injustice, and the bad guys keep on succeeding. And you know, every time there's a good guy, he's going to go down. This is encouraging people in the view that there is no moral judgment in the world.
It shows straight from the outset, it shows you intentionally that the good will not succeed.
Yes, and I think that is intentionally, and I think it's wicked, and it's false, and it's a damnable lie. And it's a misrepresentation of, it presents itself as a historical fiction. There's nothing in history that will give any credence to this view. So it's all I can say is it's pure wickedness.
Even in the events of the story of Game of Thrones, when they are based off historical events.
Yes, which it has.
That's the point of what happened.
It always does.
Because
Which Shakespeare does as well, to be fair. He takes his sources and he deviates from them. So there's artistic license in that, but the artistic license always deviates into what Shakespeare would call license, which leads to licentiousness, and that it's corrosive. Whereas liberty is to use your reason and your freedom for the purposes of goodness. And I don't think that it does that. So if you want to see the measure of a culture, look at what is popular in its art. Anyway, that imagination it also speaks of, and that's also in this play. There is an imagination which is very closely tied to the passions. And if the imagination is ruled by the passions, it leads to lunacy. People go insane. They're under the influence of the moon, by the way. This word lunacy is from the Latin for moon, lunae. They're under the influence of the moon, which is fickle, and it waxes and wanes and changes. There's no stability. There's no constancy. And irrationality, flat irrationality. And we see that at its height in the middle of the play when they're in the middle of the forest. There's crazy things going on there. So the imagination is happening there. And yet in the midst of that place where the imagination, the bad sort of imagination seems to be reigning without any rationality correcting it, Shakespeare brings the view of the imagination that the reason which was so disordered when they came into the forest can be reordered by divine intervention. And so good can come out of it. And so it threatens to go, like in the forest, in the middle of the play, we think that all of the characters might take their lives. Death may ensue. So there needs to be a strong intervention just to fix the problem. There are 4 plots. I don't think there's so I guess I use this. There are 4 plots in the play. Let me outline them here. 4 sets of characters, a male and a female. The binary is there in Shakespeare like no other. And they're ordered. There's a hierarchy of characters as well. So there's Theseus and Hippolyta. Theseus, who Shakespeare takes from classical sources, and Hippolyta. On the one hand, let me just write them down and I'll comment on who they are. There are the lovers, and there are 2 sets. There's Hermia and Lysander on the one hand, and there's Helena and Demetrius. Two sets of lovers, very common in Shakespeare. 3. There are the commoners. 4 different types of comedy. That of the commoners, and then finally there are the fairies. 4 types of comedy. I'll fill this in a little bit here. And the 4 different types of lovers, or 4 different types of figures, present 4 different hierarchies of comedy. That of Theseus and Hippolyta are relatively serious characters. So they don't really fit a comedy in the sense of being amusing. We're not finding them as laugh out loud. You're not really laughing at what Theseus does or Hippolyta. It's a high style of comedy. By the way, so Theseus is famous for defeating the Minotaur and also the Amazons, like Wonder Woman. And Hippolyta is the queen of the Amazons. So she represents characters that we read about in ancient Greek sources. Who is it? What's the Greek historian? Just drawing a blank. Anyway, question? Not related to that.
Hippolyta is the story of he goes to their island and falls in love with her, and she dies somehow, doesn't she? And the Amazons set upon him because they think that he's killed her, and so because of this, him and his men must kill all the Amazons. And then
you're talking about in the Greek source?
Isn't this
That's where it's taken from, yeah. And I'm just drawing a blank on what's the name of the Greek historian?
Herodotus?
Herodotus, yes. I can't remember, so I can't answer your question. We can look it up. I'll look it up for next time. I'll try to. But he's taken those names from that, and he stuck them here in the middle of Athens in an English play. So the names are there. It's not, he's making this up as far as I can tell. He's sticking there. Then there are the lovers, and they represent the substance of the story. The main focus is on these sets of lovers. There's a sort of a parallel plot in the play, and there is no particular source for this, as far as I'm aware. But the plots intertwine, as do the lovers. Lots of confusion going on there. Then there are the commoners. Now the commoners are going to put on a play within the play, which is one of Shakespeare's favorite devices for illustrating the function of art He does it also in Hamlet, famously. The play's the thing wherein I shall catch the conscience of the king. Here it's taken from Ovid's Metamorphoses, and it's talking about Pyramus and Thisbe, who were lovers who were on either side of the Trojan wall. One was a Trojan, one was a Greek, and they were speaking through a crack in the wall. So that story, not as far as I can recall taken from the Iliad, but it is in Ovid. And Ovid's Metamorphoses, if you haven't read it, is about a series of love, passionate relationships between usually gods and some sort of figure, usually a nymph, which leads to a change. And one change leads to another and another and so on. Very popular, by the way, Ovid's Metamorphoses in the medieval period and Renaissance. Huge source of material for writers. Even though Ovid himself wrote a series of poetry on Eros and was regarded as an immoral man, which he probably was. He seduced the emperor's niece, I think, was exiled for it. Anyway, he wrote something called the Amores. And he may have been influential historically, but in his day he was not. he didn't succeed very well. Seducing the emperor's niece is not a good idea.
Just a good way to make friends and win out.
Not really. Bad idea. And recommended this sort of course of action as well. That one give way to the passions because it was inevitable. This is the way things happen. It's the way of the world. And the Romans were always suspicious of the passions and where they led. And so they recognized we have to deal with the passions, and those that advocate it, we're going to deal with you as well. Sorry? Ironically, yeah. Even though, yeah.
They chose the two most.
They were consistent. They were consistent in this. The Romans were consistent in promoting virtue and putting down the passions. That was piety.
Why did they pick the two most passion-themed gods to represent them?
I don't know. You don't choose them. Yeah, that's.
Someone had to have chosen them.
Yes, I know. I don't know. It's a good question. That I do not know the answer to that question. But the characters, although they're taken from Ovid's Metamorphoses, they are recognizably English characters. Very English. And this is, again, typical of Shakespeare. The setting may be in Athens. The characters are English in their sensibilities. So there are the three levels and three different types of comedy, from the high to the low. And then we have the fourth level, and the fourth level runs in parallel with the other three levels, and to some degree it is aiding and assisting what's going on there. And this is the level of the fairies, and the king and queen of those are Oberon and Titania. They seem to have a power over both men and nature. They can influence the climate, for instance. Supernatural power. Now there are sources for this, literary sources. This is the source here is English folklore. Shakespeare will be drawing on here not classical sources, but his own native English mythology. So the idea of Robin Goodfellow, Puck is a type of goblin, is very popular and common in English folklore. So he's plucking it from people's own references. Oh, who did that? You know, who? I put that down and now it's there. Where did this chaos come from? Oh, it was Puck. He did it. And now these fairies personify and control the emotional forces of the humans and the plot. So they seem to be able to not rule their reason, but rule their passions. And they thereby represent disorder, forces of anarchy, potentially destructive. So they have supernatural power, but the supernatural power seems only to relate to the passions and not to the reason. That's the province in which they operate, the passions. What's interesting is Oberon relies on Puck to carry out his instructions. And Puck invariably gets it wrong. And the question that the audience has is, does he get it wrong intentionally, or does he just make mistakes? He seems to delight in mistakes. So if you're an actor playing Puck, there's a lot of scope there for, are you going to be mischievous or are you going to be bumbling? And where's the line there? And there's a bit of both. Remember, if he represents anarchy, he himself is not even in control of himself. Whereas if he were representing himself, he'd be a truly evil character. And he isn't that. He seems a little bit, he's likable. It's just that the effects of his rule are not likable. We don't like the anarchy that unfolds. But he delights in it as if it were an accident, which just seems to happen every time he works. And the audience also seems to take some delight in his operation. So there's discord here amongst all the lovers. And the outcome of that discord is potentially tragic, which is evident right from the outset of the play. When the father of Duke Theseus threatens to take his daughter's life for disobeying him. So potential tragedy right from the outset. And it doesn't get better for a long time. It seems to degenerate and be more likely that things will go astray. But in the end, there is a marriage. All of these discordant forces reconcile and are harmonized in the end. Now, it was performed on May Day. So never mind Midsummer Night, on May Day. That's what I have in my notes. And it was performed on the Earl of Southampton's estate on the occasion of his cousin's marriage. So the Earl of Southampton was one of Shakespeare's patrons. He wrote this play for that occasion on May Day. Now, on May Day, you go around a May pole. Have you ever seen a May pole? So it's a big pole, and it has ribbons around it, and you go around the pole, but the pole is a fertility symbol, phallic symbol of sorts.
Women take ribbon and they'll run around it with a ribbon, and men will go in and ask them to dance.
That sort of thing, yeah. They exist in England to this day. I actually saw one in a church I was in there. I said, there's a maypole in there. How is this possible? They said, well, what's that? And I said, that's a maypole. I had no idea. It was stuck in the closet. Never mind. Okay. I study English literature. Everything is fertile for the imagination here, and I'll leave that. Forget that. You don't know what it is? That's good. Okay, we'll just leave that alone. But it was performed on his estate, and it was written for as I said, for the occasion of the marriage. So it's comic. There are potential tragedies that can ensue in a marriage. There are also great blessings and benefits from it, and it's a symbol of Christ's love for the church. So it operates on multiple levels. Remember, again, in the book of Revelation, the new heaven and the new earth are ushered in by the heavenly Jerusalem coming down from God dressed as a bride. So it has this eschatological sense. It's the purpose of life is being met by the marriage, which is also there in Genesis 1, Adam and Eve. Yes?
Did you say it was the Earl's niece or his cousin?
Cousin. I don't know which I said there, but it's cousin. So it begins in discord and in chaos, and it gradually resolves itself over the course of the play. Note that it is gradual. If it were reconciled by reason, it would happen quickly, because it's either right or wrong. Reasoning is that if you write philosophy essays, you can write them short and sweet. Get to the point, make a solid argument, and you're done. Don't add extra words. It's like, that's it. You've made the case, that's good. The imagination works a little more gradually, and I would say with greater sophistication. It just doesn't just push you to a conclusion, it pulls you towards it. It draws you, it makes you want that conclusion to be right. And that's how I think drama and literature is in some ways superior to philosophy. It doesn't just say this is right, it makes you want it to be right. So your passions work with your reason. This is why people like literature, but good literature. So there's this conflict between eros and social order that's overcome through the imagination. So let me read from the first few lines here. So that was all stage setting. It's taking place in the palace of Duke Theseus. And Theseus and Hippolyta enter and take their seats, followed by Philostrate and attendants. Philostrate is the master of revels. The revels that will be part of the marriage. There's a great deal of celebration. Theseus. Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws on apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. She lingers my desires, like to a stepdame, or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue. 4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time. And then the moon, like to a silver bow new bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnities. Go, said Theseus, Philostrate, stir up the Athenian youth to merriments. Awake the pert and nimble spirit of mirth. Turn melancholy forth to funerals. The pale companion is not for our pomp. Out goes Philostrate. Hippolyta, I wooed thee with my sword, and won thy love, doing thee injuries. But I will wed thee in another key, with pomp, with triumph, and with reveling. So there's been a political marriage, a political solution. This happens in politics. If you're a king, you often have to marry somebody that you don't want to marry. It allows for concord between countries. So the effect of a marriage actually literally brings about a political peace. So you marry this person. Why? Because it's politically expedient. And it's important that you do so, and you're doing it out of duty. Now, in our day, it's almost unimaginable that someone should do this. They shouldn't be forced to marry someone they don't love, but they have a different understanding of love, and love is associated with harmony and concord on not just a personal level, but a political level and a theological level. It has multiple levels, and they're not going to reduce love simply to the lowest common denominator, which is the passions, which is in our day the sole reason why one gets married, or at least so says our culture. Yes?
It's also hinged on the importance they place on family.
Of course.
Because all of a sudden, these people you're at war with are now your family. And
they are your family. They've conquered them, and they could. The alternative, he could have enslaved her. Could have killed them all. He could have made them all slaves. Instead, he's conquered, but he's decided he's going to wed their queen and unite their peoples. So he wooed thee with his sword. It's a strange sort of wooing. Like Isabella and Ferdinand, of course. But again, for our sensibilities and the reduction of love in our day to be solely eros, this just strikes so strongly against us and our sensibilities. But they think of love on the significance of love on the communal level and the political level, which it has. Quite frankly, nations have gone to war over things like this, discord, and it's very common in Europe, for instance, for European monarchs to marry off their sons and daughters to other monarchs so that they ensure that there isn't war between their countries. Practical. And that's because the king has 2 bodies. Let me say something about that very briefly. I'll say more about it in a different class. The king has 2 bodies. And if you're interested in this, by the way, Kantorowicz, medievalist, The King's 2 Bodies, if you want to look this up. The one is his own body. And the other is he's the head of the body politic. The personal one lives and dies like the rest of us. Elizabeth is currently Queen of England. When she dies, they'll take the crown from her head and place it on her son's head. And they'll say, the Queen is dead, long live the King. Because the monarchy perdures beyond the individual who bears that crown. She represents the office. And a good king or queen will remember that they are not their own. They belong to their people, and their people belong to them. And people admire Elizabeth precisely for her devotion to duty. And they, on the other hand, have contempt for those who are around them, perhaps. I won't get into details like this. I'll upset many people. But kings and queens who act as if they were only like us or like celebrities. They're not celebrities. They have a duty to perform. It's a tough place to be honest. I would not want to be a king. But that's it. There's a devotion to duty, and they have two senses. Their own body, their own physical body, and yet the body is also the body of their people. And they have to represent that body, and they can never forget their body. And so when Henry VIII can't bear an heir, he is worried not only about the fact that he can't have children, he's personally devastated, it's the fact that the result of this will probably be civil war, because there will be no lawful successor. People mock Henry VIII, and probably for good reason, but he was worried about the political consequences of not having an heir. So he has to think on that level. So here when Theseus is acting and talking about wooing, he's speaking of himself as a political ruler, as the ruler of an army. My army defeated yours, that's how I wooed you. Metaphorical use of the language. But now I with my body will wed thee in another key. What's the other key? The personal. And she recognizes this. Okay, the war is over, and now here's my husband. This is a better outcome than I could have had. So Aegeus enters with his daughter Hermia, followed by Lysander and Demetrius. So here enters, so this is a promising note. Marriage. There was a war, now there's a marriage. So it starts off extremely well, and then Aegeus enters. Now who is Aegeus? Aegeus is, well, I'll let him speak. Yeah, he's Hermia's dad. Aegeus. Happy be Theseus, our renowned duke. Thanks, good Aegeus. What's the news with thee? Full of vexation come I, with complaint against my child, my daughter Hermia. Stand forth, Demetrius. My noble lord, this man hath my consent to marry her. Stand forth, Lysander. And my gracious duke, this man hath witched the bosom of my child. Thou, Lysander, thou hast given her rhymes and interchanged love tokens with my child. Thou hast by moonlight at her window sung with feigning voice verses of feigning love, and stolen the impression of her fantasy with bracelets of thy hair, rings, gauds, conceits, knacks, trifles, nosegays, sweetmeats, messengers of strong prevailment in unhardened youth. With cunning hast thou filched my daughter's heart, turned her obedience, which is due to me, to stubborn harshness. And, my gracious duke, be it so she will not hear before your grace consent to marry with Demetrius. I beg the ancient privilege of Athens. As she is mine, I may dispose of her, which shall be either to this gentleman or to her death, according to our law immediately provided in that case. He wants it right then or there. Make your choice. You marry him, you agree to do this in front of the duke, or executed right now on the spot. Boy, you really must love her. But we get the contrast here between the personal and the political. He's appealing to the public good, but he seems entirely ruled by his personal desires here. On the other hand, his charge against Lysander, we're going to find there's some merit to it. He seems to have won her heart simply, I just thought it would be a fun thing to do. See if I can get this girl to like me. Theseus. And they come before the Duke. Why does the Duke have to decide? Well, where do you go with this? There's no church here, by the way. The monarch is acting in the stead of God with divine power of judgment in some ways. He is, in this case, going to decide over life or death. Theseus, what say you, Hermia? Be advised, fair maid, to you your father should be as a god, one that composed your beauties, yea, and one to whom you are but as a form in wax, to by him imprinted, and within his power to leave the figure or disfigure it. Demetrius is a worthy gentleman. So is Lysander. Okay. In himself he is, but in this kind, wanting your father's voice, the other must be held the worthier. So he lacks your father's voice, and so the other is worthier. Simply for that reason. Your father advocates for him, so that's what decides it. Theseus, or Hermia, I would my father looked but with my eyes. Theseus, rather your eyes must with his judgment look. I do entreat your grace to pardon me. I know not by what power I am made bold, nor how it may concern my modesty in such a presence here to plead my thoughts. But I beseech your grace that I may know the worst that may befall me in this case if I refuse to wed Demetrius. Now she's just heard from her father what the law is, but she's appealing to him. What do you say, the worst that may befall me? Theseus, either to die the death, or to abjure forever the society of men. Okay, so he gives her an out. According to her father, Aegeus, she decides or she dies right now. He says, either to die the death, or to abjure forever the society of men. So you can go into exile. You can go to a nunnery. You can agree not to marry. There's a possibility for you here. You don't have to marry this man. Now, this is a Christian out. Right? You have a choice here. You can be married to this man or you can be married to Christ. That's it. You can have a devotion here, but you're going to be married one way or the other. There is no other option. Now, it may sound odd and harsh, but he's giving her a good option here. Within his scope. He can't just say ignore your father without saying the law is illegal, which he cannot do. He's not above the law. He has to act in accordance with the law. So this is the power of right reasoning here. Therefore, fair Hermia, question your desires, know of your youth, examine well your blood, whether if you yield not to your father's choice, you can endure the livery of a nun. For to be in shady cloister mewed, to live a barren sister all your life, chanting faint hymns to the cold, fruitless moon. Thrice blessed they that master sow their blood, to undergo such maiden pilgrimage. But earthlier happy is the rose distilled, than that which withering on the virgin thorn grows, lives, and dies in single blessedness. So he recommends the two forms of life. The one is more earthly happy, and the other is more spiritually happy. Hermia, so will I grow, so live, so die, my lord, ere I will yield my virgin patent up unto his lordship, whose unwished yoke my soul consents not to give sovereignty. Take time to pause, and by the next new moon, the sealing day betwixt my love and me, for everlasting bond of fellowship, upon that day either prepare to die for disobedience to your father's will, or else to wed Demetrius as he would, or on Diana's altar to protest for austerity and single life. Now, Diana is a virgin, so to live in celibacy in the nunnery. You have 3 choices. Die, wed Demetrius, or live the celibate life. Now he's giving her options. He also sees, I didn't present the lines very well. She's obviously upset by what her father said and angry. And he's giving her a cooling down time. Okay, you're going to take a choice. Right now you're saying this, but maybe in 4 days' time, you may rather wed this man and do what your father wants you to do rather than kill yourself or die or live in chastity. But you will have time to reflect on that and do that. So it's wise counsel from, I think, a benevolent ruler. And then Demetrius speaks, the one who desires her and her father's favorite. Relent, sweet Hermia, and Lysander, yield thy crazed title to my certain right. You have her father's love, Demetrius. Let me have Hermia's. Do you marry him? Yeah, so now it sounds funny, but I see Lysander as a rake and a man who has nobody's best interests other than his own. That's how I view him. And it is sort of funny. Will you marry him? Okay, well, that's very funny. But who's going to pay the price of this love here? It's only her, right? So if he really loved her, he would give her up here, right? And then she could still choose. I'm not going to be with you, but you could marry him, or you could still choose chastity if you really want it, but I'm not going to be the instrument of your death. But he's a selfish young man. Anyway, Aegeus, scornful Lysander, true he hath my love, and what is mine my love shall render him. And she is mine, and all my right of her I do estate unto Demetrius. I am, my lord, as well derived as he, as well possessed. My love is more than his. My fortunes every day as well as fairly ranked, if not with vantage, as Demetrius. And, which is more than all these boasts can be, I am beloved of beauteous Hermia. Why should not I then prosecute my right? Demetrius, I'll avouch it to his head, made love to Nidar's daughter, Helena, and won her soul. And she, sweet lady, devoutly dotes in idolatry upon this spotted and inconstant man. So now he not only says that he prefers her, but he casts aspersions upon his rival. This man has made love to Nidar's daughter. Now, made love does not mean what we take by it here. He has wooed her as well and won her affections. So this is a man who is notorious for playing with ladies' affections and not meaning anything by it. And he doesn't mean anything by it here, that's what he's saying. So everybody comes off with a cloud of suspicion over their motivations here. So there aren't the good guy, the bad guy. Demetrius and Lysander both have some question marks around them. Theseus, I must confess that I have heard so much, and with Demetrius thought to have spoke thereof. But being over full of self-affairs, my mind did lose it. But Demetrius, come, Aegeus, you shall go with me. I have some private schooling for you both. For you, fair Hermia, look you arm yourself to fit your fancies to your father's will, or else the law of Athens yields you up, which by no means we may extenuate, to death, or to a vow of single life. Come, my Hippolyta. What cheer, my love? Demetrius and Aegeus, go along. I must employ you in some business against our nuptial, and confer with you of something neatly that concerns yourselves. With duty and desire we follow you. And they all go except for Hermia and Lysander, the two lovers. Now even Demetrius has left. So the two that want to be married now speak. Just the two of them on stage. Everybody else has departed. How now, my love? Why is your cheek so pale? What a stupid question. How chance the roses there do fade so fast? Belike for want of rain, which I could well besteem them from the tempest of my eyes. So she's weeping. Ay me, for aught that I could ever read, could ever hear my tale or history, tale or history, the course of true love never did run smooth. But Either it was different in blood, oh, cross, too high to be enthralled to low, or else misgrafted in respective years, oh, spite, too old to be engaged to young, or else it stood upon the choice of friends. Oh, hell, to choose love by another's eyes, as in her father's sake. Or if there were a sympathy in choice, war, death, or sickness did lay siege to it, making it momentary as a sound, swift as a shadow, short as any dream, brief as the lightning in the collied night, that in a spleen unfolds both heaven and earth, and ere a man hath power to say, behold, the jaws of darkness do devour it up, so quick bright things come to confusion. So Lysander here, interestingly, suggesting that he understands the ways of love and the ways in which it can be thwarted, so he's not some dimwit. If then true lovers have ever been crossed, it stands as an edict in destiny, says Hermia. Then let us teach our trial patience, because it is a customary cross, as due to love as thoughts and dreams and sighs, wishes and tears, poor fancies, followers. A good persuasion. Therefore hear me, Hermia. I have a widow aunt, a dowager of great revenue, and she hath no child. From Athens is her house remote 7 leagues, and she respects me as her only son. There, gentle Hermia, may I marry thee. And to that place the sharp Athenian law cannot pursue us. If thou lovest me then, steal forth thy father's house tomorrow night. And in the wood, a league without the town, where I did meet thee once with Helena, to observe to a morn of May, there will I stay for thee. So there's the plan. My good Lysander, I swear to thee by Cupid's strongest bow, by his